This is Truth Titan, where power gets held to account and silence is never an option. Today we pull back the curtain on what might be one of the most consequential foreign policy shifts in recent history. The Trump administration, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, is now threatening to walk away from peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Why? Because diplomacy is taking too long, citing frustration, complexity, and a lack of progress. Trump and Rubio are signaling they'd rather move on than stay the course. But let's be clear, Ukraine can't walk away, and without US involvement, the balance of power may tilt toward Putin, risking everything from NATO stability to the future of global alliances. Stay with us as we break down the dangerous implications, the fractured logic, and what walking away really means when lives are on the line. You're listening to Truth Titan, because somebody has to say it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something pretty critical. The Trump administration seems to be sending some really strong signals, threatening to pull out of the Ukraine peace talks.
It definitely feels like we're at a potential turning point. The sources we've seen are quite stark.
Yeah, stark warnings. We've got statements from President Trump, from Secretary Rubio. It sounds like patience is running thin, really thin. And this timeline they're talking about seems incredibly short.
Extremely short. And you can sense the frustration building, can't you? We should also probably touch on Vice President Vance's comments, which seem a little different.
Right, a bit more optimistic maybe. And there's this whole other angle too, this potential minerals deal with Ukraine. It's all quite tangled.
It is. So our mission today is to unpack these threats, look at the timeline, the frustration, the minerals deal, and what it all means for U.S. foreign policy and for Ukraine itself.
Okay, let's start with the core statements. Trump and Rubio. What exactly are they threatening?
Well, President Trump said he wants a deal quickly. He used pretty strong language, saying if either side makes it difficult, we're just going to say, you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass.
Take a pass. Wow. And Rubio. He seemed even more specific on timing.
He did. Speaking from Paris, Rubio talked about needing to determine progress in a matter of days. He was clear the U.S. won't keep at it for weeks and months on end.
A matter of days? That's almost an ultimatum, isn't it?
It certainly sounds like one. He basically said, if it's clear this isn't doable soon, the president will likely just say, well, we're done.
But here's a point of tension already. Rubio sets this day's time frame, but when Trump was asked directly, he didn't actually set a hard deadline.
No, he didn't. Which is interesting, right? Is this strategic ambiguity, maybe keep maximum pressure on, or is it perhaps not everyone's entirely on the same page within the administration?
Could be either. It creates uncertainty, that's for sure. Now let's get behind the rhetoric. What are sources saying about why this urgency now?
Well, the reporting, particularly citing European diplomats, suggests Rubio's comments are a direct reflection of growing White House frustration, specifically with what they see as Russian intransigence.
So they feel Russia isn't budging.
Apparently so. And adding to that, we're hearing privately from Trump officials that the idea of a quick peace deal is looking increasingly elusive. The optimism seems to be fading.
And there's this other layer too, the concern inside Trump's team that if this drags on, it starts looking like Trump's war.
Exactly. That's a huge political calculation, surely. One source familiar with the internal discussions even said Trump is starting to question if sticking with these talks is really worthwhile.
Questioning if it's worthwhile. That signals a potential shift, maybe looking for an off-ramp. But have the talks actually achieved anything so far?
Well, there have been meetings. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has met Putin 3 times. Rubio's spoken with Lavrov, met with Ukrainians, Europeans.
Okay, so activity, but progress.
That seems to be the problem. Sources say no real new ground has been struck. Security guarantees remain uncertain. And Witkoff himself apparently seemed a bit taken aback.
Taken aback? How so?
He reportedly noted that Russia wants so much more than just a ceasefire. He described it as having a lot of detail attached to it, complicated, with real problematic things happening.
Which suggests maybe the administration underestimated the complexity or Russia's demands.
It could point to that, yes. It wasn't going to be a simple handshake deal.
No.
There's also a report from Bloomberg, I believe, that the U.S. offered Russia some sanctions relief to try and move things forward. Rubio had hinted at that possibility earlier, too.
Sanctions relief. Okay, that's a significant card to play. But even that doesn't seem to have broken the deadlock yet.
Apparently not significantly, no.
Now let's bring in Vice President Vance, because he sounded, well, quite different, more positive.
He did. He talked about the possibility of ending this very brutal war, and he even mentioned some things, even in the past 24 hours, that suggested a chance for a ceasefire.
So, Rubio and Trump sound ready to walk, Witkoff sounds concerned about the complexity, but Vance sees positive signs. What do we make of that contrast?
It's quite stark, isn't it? It could be different interpretations of intelligence, or perhaps Vance is trying to maintain a more hopeful public face for the administration, but it does risk sending mixed signals.
Definitely. And it raises questions about internal coherence. But let's game this out. What happens if Trump does walk away? If they follow through on the threat?
The analysis seems pretty consistent on this. It would likely really play into Putin's hands. Ukraine loses its key backer in these talks, both politically and financially.
So Moscow gets what it wants either way, either a deal tilted in its favor because of the pressure, or the U.S. just leaves.
That seems to be the assessment. Yeah, a sort of win-win scenario for Moscow. Either a favorable deal now, or just wait for American patience to run out.
It puts Ukraine in an incredibly difficult position.
Extremely vulnerable, yes.
Okay, let's quickly touch on this minerals deal with Ukraine. Trump expects to sign it next week after a previous attempt failed.
That's the report. It apparently fell through back in February after Zelensky met with Vance. Now it seems to be back on the table.
Is there a direct link suggested between this deal and the peace talks? Like, is it leverage?
The sources don't explicitly state a direct quid pro quo, but the timing is conspicuous, let's say. It could be leverage, or perhaps a way to show continued U.S. engagement with Kyiv, even if the peace talks themselves are faltering. Or maybe it's just a separate economic track. It's hard to say definitively from the reports.
Right. So another element in a complex picture. What about the Europeans? We mentioned Rubio was in Paris?
Yes, those Paris talks were described as the first really substantive, high-level, and in-person talks involving European powers on Trump's peace initiative.
And how did they go?
Rubio apparently felt the U.S. framework got an encouraging reception. Zelensky's office called the talks constructive and positive, so outwardly some positive language there.
And Rubio acknowledged the Europeans have a central role.
He did, especially regarding sanctions relief. That's obviously a huge piece of leverage that primarily sits with Europe. Any deal would need their buy-in on lifting sanctions.
Makes sense. What about security guarantees for Ukraine? That's always been a major issue.
It was discussed in Paris. Rubio reportedly framed it as an issue we can fix, but he also cautioned there were bigger challenges.
Bigger challenge? Like what? What are the core sticking points?
Well, the fundamental demands haven't really changed. Russia wants Ukraine to drop NATO ambitions, cede the 4 regions it occupies, limit its military. Ukraine sees these demands as basically asking for its surrender.
Tantamount to demanding its capitulation was the phrase used, I think.
Exactly. And then there's that Bloomberg report again, suggesting Washington might even consider recognizing Russian control over Crimea as part of a deal.
Recognizing Crimea, that would be a massive shift in U.S. policy and hugely controversial, surely.
Absolutely. A major concession, and one that would likely face significant opposition both domestically and from allies. It highlights just how far apart the core positions still are.
So let's try to pull these threads together. We have this intense urgency, threats to walk away in days. Yet simultaneously, an admission, even surprise, at the complexity. We have Vance sounding optimistic while others sound pessimistic.
The contradictions are quite apparent, aren't they? The push for speed versus the reality of deep-seated complex issues. The differing tones from key administration figures.
What does this do for U.S. foreign policy? For American credibility? Threatening to walk away from something this critical, this quickly?
Well, it raises serious concerns. If the U.S. abruptly abandons a major peace effort like this, it could really damage its reputation as a reliable mediator. It might signal impatience, maybe a lack of strategic depth or staying power when things get tough.
And for Ukraine, the implications are obviously dire, losing that U.S. backing in the talks.
It leaves them incredibly exposed, facing Russia potentially feeling emboldened, with less international pressure focused through a unified negotiation channel.
So the situation feels extremely precarious. These threats from Trump and Rubio aren't subtle. A matter of days is hanging over these talks.
It really is. That explicit timeline, combined with the acknowledged lack of breakthroughs and the sheer complexity of what needs resolving, it creates a very worrying picture.
Is it a bluff? A hardball tactic? Or are they genuinely preparing to cut their losses?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? The rhetoric is aggressive, but walking away carries huge risks too. It's hard to know for sure what the calculation is.
So for you, our listeners, the question to ponder is, What does it signal when a superpower like the US threatens such a rapid exit from complex, high-stakes diplomacy? What might that mean for its influence for global stability and especially for the future of Ukraine caught in the middle of this brutal conflict? A deeply concerning situation to watch.
Indeed, the potential consequences, intended or unintended, are immense. We'll certainly need to keep a close eye on developments in the coming days.
If today's episode left you thinking, good. If it left you angry, even better. Because disengagement from peace isn't policy, it's surrender. And the truth is, Ukraine's fight isn't just theirs. It's a test of everything America claims to stand for. If you believe that truth still matters, help us spread it. Hit follow, drop a rating, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Want to go further? Click the link in the show notes to support the channel. Grab some merch, make a one-time donation, or become a sustaining member. And as always, speak truth to power.